Welcome to Deer Talk Now. I'm Brad Rucks. With me today is Matt from Lifelink, which is a service that I hope I never have to need, but I really want to know more about. Can you give us a little information about Lifelink, Matt?
Yeah, for sure. So Lifelink is an air medical transport company. We're based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We have 11 different bases throughout Minnesota, and specifically here in Wisconsin, we have 3 different bases. We provide advanced life support care for interfacility transports from hospital to hospital. We do scene flight capabilities for anything from car wrecks, medical emergencies that can't make it to a hospital, car wrecks, deer hunting
Tree stand
accidents,
falls, right?
Tree stand
Somebody
falls,
gets shot.
absolutely. Yep. Anything and everything that's a critical injured or medical patient we can respond to.
Man, scary stuff. I hope I never have to use it, but if, per se, somebody falls out of a tree stand, right? What would be my steps? I mean, what should I know to do in that situation?
So the first step is to activate your 911 system, right? Because for us to come on a scene response, right, we're going to need a couple different factors. We're going to need a secured landing zone. We're going to need additional medical resources if there's any transport out of the woods from where you are to a landing site. So calling 911, advising them your location and the situation, and stressing the urgency of the situation, like there's a legitimate injury here. That gets the ball rolling. And then from there, the county dispatches or our own communications center will get involved and dispatch the closest available air service. And then from there, it's just wheels in motion getting to where you're at.
So what is a secured air zone? Like you mentioned that. I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, so what our helicopters need is 100 by 100 foot space. We need to be advised of like any type of obstacles in the area. So if it's 100 by 100, maximum space and it's surrounded by trees, that's not ideal. We need approach and leaving room.
Sure.
We need to know about like if there's any radio towers in the area, stuff like that. But basically a nice level, flat, open area.
Sure. And if you think that in hunting terms, I always put it in yards, right? So you're looking at 35 yards by 35 yards should be plenty enough space.
A nice sized food plot.
As a hunter, I want to know, unfortunately, if I ever have to use this, I want to make sure I know where that place is on my property, right? I mean, you
Absolutely.
should. So, okay, let's go to the next step. So somebody did fall out of a tree stand. I've already called that 911 service, so I got everything, all those balls in motion. Now, what do? I just sit and wait, or what do I do?
If you're the injured party, a lot of times when you have a significant injury, there's a lot of adrenaline through your body, right? So you're probably not aware of how injured you are. The best thing you can do is just kind of stay calm, assess your situation, and start trying to figure out a way to get people to your location, right? If you can take something off that's visible, put it on your body. If you're able to move, get to a little higher location so people can see you. But basically staying calm and figuring out a way to be visible for those first responders.
We always recommend to people, especially any hunter that goes out there, make sure somebody knows where you are, right? So at my house, you could use a simple map system where you put a pin in the stand that you're going to be in, or you can tell your wife, you can tell your kids, wherever, here's where I'm going to be tonight. If something happens, this is the first spot to look, correct? I mean, that'd be a good starting spot.
Yeah, absolutely. Having someone know exactly where you are. I mean, nobody likes to share their hunting locations exactly.
Yeah, I'm not telling you where my land even is right now, but I'll tell my wife and kids. I can trust them.
Yeah. Having that backup system, like a check-in system, for sure.
If say it was one of my boys, and heaven help me, that'll never happen, but if I'm the one that goes out there and check on them, what should I do? So if I see that they fell out of their tree and they're unresponsive, I'll be dialing 911 right away. But is there anything else that I should do, or should I just try to not do anything? Or
well, it's all really situational dependent, right? So when you look at, say, a tree stand fall, that's what we call a multi-system trauma, right? You could have a head injury in association with a spinal injury in association with some sort of internal bleeding. Yeah. So it's a multi-system trauma. So when they're unresponsive, you don't really know what it is exactly. So the best thing you can do is to put them in a secure spot. Try not to move, especially their neck, their cervical, like their neck area, their spine. You want to make sure you're not exacerbating anything, right? if there's any major bleeding that you see, obviously, put pressure on that. Without blood, we can't really do anything else. So keeping them in a stable position, looking for any immediate life threats if you can stop bleeding by putting pressure on it. Make sure they're breathing. There's a lot of really basic things people can do regarding managing airways. Just kind of make sure that they're breathing. If they're making a weird noise when they're breathing, maybe move that jaw a little bit, see if that stops. But the big thing is watch that spine, and if there's any type of bleeding, try and control it.
Okay, worst case for you guys is probably at night, right? If this happens in the evening hunt, now it's dark, how do you find that location? I mean, so I have that 35 by 35 zone that we need, yards where you're going to land. How do you find that? What's the process there?
So there's a couple different ways. Most dispatch centers can ping a cell phone. That gets you somewhat close. And that's why it's paramount that we involve these other first responders as well, because they can get there. They can provide an exact lat and long for a landing site. But all of our helicopters have night vision goggle capability. Like all three of us in the aircraft have state-of-the-art NVGs. Like you can see the light on a cell phone in a woods from like 5 miles away.
Oh my gosh.
It's pretty insane. Moon phase plays into that a little bit, but night ops are obviously a little bit dangerous because of the darkness. It doesn't make it daylight, but coordinating everything, good communication, all that stuff.
So you mentioned some of the equipment, and it sounds like it's high dollar, right? So how are you guys funded?
So we're a nonprofit, right? So we're funded through a consortium-based hospital system. So there's a group of hospitals in the Lake States here that banded together and developed a helicopter system that is us, right? So they fund us. We're also funded through the insurance billing that we do for every call. And then newest here in the last couple of years is a philanthropic sector that we're building to raise money to cover some of the charitable care that we give.
Nice.
Deer Talk Now is brought to you by Full Range Mounting Systems. These mounting systems are a great way to manage all of your mounts in a stylish and organized manner. We are using their pedestal mount here on the podcast set for 2 shoulder mounts, and it looks just awesome. Be sure to check out their mounting systems at fullrangesystems.com, and for 15% off your order, use code DTN.
Now I'm going to go to a different situation. So, we talked about a tree stand. More likely car accidents is probably the bulk of your business, or not? Like, is it a lot of car accidents?
It's kind of variable by base. So us in Rhinelander, for example, it's tourist dependent. We've got a lot of ATV accidents, a lot of snowmobile accidents, a lot of people coming and opening up their cabins, falling off of ladders. It's really diverse. A lot of different injury patterns, a lot of different scene flights.
Yeah, you don't even think about the ATV accidents because how many people, there's so many individuals out there that really don't know about how to drive on a slope, right? Everybody thinks it's easy to do.
Yeah.
Until you're doing it and you get a lot of newbies, even probably jet ski accidents, tons of stuff out there, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, you don't really think about all the dangerous things you do when you're on vacation. Like when you're hunting, you're driving an ATV or a UTV to go up in a deer stand, and then afterwards you're physically exerting yourself if you're not in shape. Like there's just so many boxes you check doing these outdoor activities.
And sometimes it's just, stupidity on the person's. Yeah, I'm going to give you a situation that I did many moons ago. I shot a buck. Okay, it's back in the Tamarack Swamp, and for whatever reason, my back tag had fallen off. So I remember in the old days in Wisconsin, we had to have a back tag. I always put my extra coat on the backpack, right? Well, walking into my stand, it was warm. My coat fell off my backpack. So I don't really have a tag. But I'm out in the tree. I shoot a big buck. And now I'm, field dress it. I'm going to tag it. Man, I don't have the tag. Oh, my God. So now I'm looking for my tag in the dark. And I'm like, screw it. I'm going to get this deer out. It's not like I'm trying to do anything illegal. But I was coming down the neighbor's dike, and he took his dike out. He took out the bridge, and I literally drove right off 12 feet. And the ATV rolled, fell down on top of me. Thank God I hit a creek, and it was muddy, and I just got pushed down. Mm-hmm. I was able to get it out. But I easily, had that been rocks in there or something else, I mean, that's the situation sometimes people get into. I mean, it's scary, scary stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to wiggle out because it was so muddy and get free. And then I was so bullheaded, I tried to get the deer out. And
priorities.
oh
right?
yeah, right. So an hour and a half later, I couldn't get it out. And if I would have been smart enough to use a flashlight and look, I could have just dragged it down the creek and it leveled off and could have got it out there. Next day, I found my tagged them. It was all legal. So perfect example of one of those things that just happens and sometimes you don't expect it. So with funding, what as an individual, is there anything I can do? You know, I'm just curious on that point, you know.
Yeah, as an individual, so we have our philanthropic director is here, and he can flesh this out a little bit more. But what we've started is we have a pamphlet and a website that you can go to, and you can pick different levels of funding. You know, anywhere from $50 to $2,000, and that money's it's really relatable, right? Like $50 will buy you a hazard vest for one of our clinicians, so when we're on a scene on a highway, we're safe. You know, $500 can cover the cost of a couple units of blood. That's life-saving for incidences where, you know, like a penetrating trauma, like a gunshot or falling from a stand with a bow in, that broadhead goes where it's not supposed to go. Like,
oh yeah,
the trauma care is very simple. There's just a couple things you need, but they're very expensive. And there's that different level of giving and funding can support, you know, specific things that are really tangible.
And it's a great cause, right? I mean, you could be saving somebody's life. I mean, just by doing the little things like that and making a big difference.
Yeah, I think it's a great cause. I work there.
well, and I hope I never have to use your service. But if I do, I hope you're the one that comes out there and helps me out.
Yeah, we the thing with flight and the job that we do that's really interesting is I can come into work at Rhinelander. And at the end of a 12 or 14-hour shift, like I could be in Grand Marais, Minnesota, or down in Milwaukee or west of the cities. Because once, you know, we'll take a patient from, let's say, Rhinelander down to Milwaukee, and then we're coming home. We're fair game for anything we're flying over. Like, we're tracked everywhere we are. So if we're an air resource and there's a car accident in Waiawega, we could be the closest resource, even though there's a helicopter in Green Bay. You know, going to Minneapolis, you can't really get out of Minneapolis without getting snagged with at least one or two more calls.
Wow.
So it's a really interesting, you know, kind of mix of things you see on a daily basis.
How big is your area then total that you guys cover?
So each base has primary response areas. So it's 60 miles is generally like a primary response area, but a helicopter can fly 150 miles about in one way without stopping for fuel. And, you know, as a helicopter, every morning as a crew, we do a brief and we go through the fuel status, weather alerts, and anything that's going to affect our duty day. And when we accept a flight, there's three legs of that flight, right? There's base to scene, scene to hospital, and hospital home. In order to accept that flight, we have to have green weather for the duration of time estimated at each stop for all three legs. So that all plays into like what our response area is. But essentially, each base has a 60-mile primary response area, and we have 11 bases across 2 states.
This episode is also brought to you by Moultrie. Moultrie Mobile's Edge Trail camera is affordable and easy to set up. The camera works on multiple networks nationwide and even has built-in storage. That means no SD card required. For more information, visit MoultrieMobile.com.
How frequent do you get called out then? I mean, is it...
So it's, as a company, I think we get about 8,500 requests a year.
Wow.
Due to weather and other situations, we accept about half of those. Some get sent to other helicopter services that are closer because we're going to do what's right for the patient, not what's right for Lifelink. We want the closest air resource there as fast as we can. Base specific, I mean, you know, obviously summer's going to be busy, fall is going to be busy, snowmobile season is going to be busy, and there's a couple off months, you know, like December, March, April. Those are slower months, but generally during our busy seasons, we're averaging like 1 to 2 calls per shift.
Sure.
Flying somewhere. Yep.
And summers are probably the busiest, right? Because there's more tourists, more campers, more everything, and then going right in the fall, everybody's got their fall hobbies. So,
Yep. None of these hobbies are very safe.
Explain your day-to-day. You know, like for you as an individual member of Lifelink, What's your day-to-day like?
So we work a variable shift pattern. So half the time I'm working days and half the time I'm working nights. You come into work half hour early. We'll go and immediately check the aircraft, go through all of our equipment, make sure our batteries are charged, make sure our medications are where they're supposed to be. Get our flight suits on right at 7 a.m. or p.m. because that's the protocol. And then we'll have a crew brief. So we'll go through with the pilot, like I was talking about, we go through our weather, whether or not we have any ride-alongs for the day, just anything that's going to affect our duty day. And after that, aircraft's checked, we've done our brief, we're studying, we're reading, we're have some downtime, we're cooking lunch. We have at Rhinelander, for example, we have a house right at the airport.
Nice.
And then there's a helipad right outside with our hangar across the road. So as soon as we get a call, what'll happen is we'll get a notification on our phone and on our handheld radios. And what it's going to do is it's just going to tell us you're going for a scene flight or you're going for an inter-facility flight. And it'll tell us the location of the scene or the hospital and the destination if it's an inter-facility. Like we're going to go from Minocqua down to Marshfield, Maine and Marshfield. And we don't get any patient information at all. So at that point, the pilot has to check weather to make sure all three legs are good. And then they're communicating with our communication center and our operations center. And they're double checking weather and any type of safety hazards on any of those legs. And they make a decision. And then we as a crew make a decision whether or not we're going to take that flight. So all four aspects have to say yes to that flight. And if we accept it, then they give us patient information because they don't want us, our decisions to take or not take a flight based on what that patient is.
What he needs. How long does that, it sounds like it'd be a long process, but it's got to be quick, right?
So we have to be skids up in under 10 minutes. That's our goal. So by the time that initial call comes in, all those weather checks, all our gear needs to be on the helicopter. It needs to be started up and off the ground in 10 minutes.
Wow.
The whole point of having a helicopter is fast response and fast transport to definitive care.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely, because somebody needs it, right? I mean, that's the whole goal. You want to get them to the hospital or a better place as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Weather. So you mentioned weather several times. What kind of weather are, I'm sure you want it clear and sunny, right? But what kind of conditions can you guys fly in?
So it takes a lot more than what you would think. So what we have is aircraft equipped with visual flight rule capabilities. So we have to have certain ceilings, like 1,000 feet and 2 miles visibility during the day. Night, it's a little bit lower, but that has to be there on all legs. So it's not just cloud cover. It's like fog, ground fog. We have to be able to see the ground at all times.
Yeah.
So it gets kind of tricky in the spring to kind of gauge where that fog is going to be.
Yeah, I bet.
And there's a lot of times we'll depart on a flight and we'll get halfway there and we can't make it. We have to cancel that call because that's what's safe.
So then does another, what happens then?
So most of the aircraft in our operating area operate on the same visual flight rules.
Okay.
There are instrument flight rules for aircraft that have different electronic capabilities for navigation. They still have limitations. But generally what will happen if we turn down a flight before we lift, they might call another aircraft from a different location and see if they can get there from a different angle.
Sure.
Usually it'll involve up to 2 or 3 different aircraft. Usually if one turns it down, they're all going to turn it down. In that instance, if we can, we work with ground to help transport that patient, or we actually have a fixed wing aircraft in Minneapolis that we can send to the closest airport to help facilitate that transport.
Wow. Well, a lot goes into the whole process, really. A lot more than you think.
Yeah, and there's times when we'll go to a scene call, and we got there, but then our helicopter has to leave because weather's changed. And we're not just going to leave that patient, right? So then we're going to take our gear, get in whatever ambulance we can, and then go with that patient to the hospital.
So what kind of training do you have in order to do the job you're doing?
So there's training, and then there's the experience aspect, right? So all the paramedics at Lifelink have to have a certain amount of experience in years before they can apply. Myself, I worked at a full-time fire department for 8 years before I came here. I was a certified nationally registered paramedic. And then once you come to Lifelink, you have to get the next level, which is a flight paramedic certification. And that's the whole next level of like critical care, blood administration, IV infusions, some of the trauma care we provide, like any type of open chest activity. Those are all the next level of flight medicine. And you have to have that within a year and a half of starting at Lifelink. And then we also have different pediatric certifications, neonatal resuscitation capabilities. We're some of the highest trained paramedics that you can get.
Wow.
Just on the level of certifications that we have to have.
Now, how do you get certified? I mean, is it a courses that you go through? Do you have to travel for that? I mean, just curious.
And this goes into, why Lifelink is such a great company is they pay for us to go to training. They pay for the training. They invest a lot of money in us so that we can be, the best that we can. They're never, if we bring a course to them that we want to go to, each paramedic and each clinician has a personal development fund, from $900 to almost $2,000 a year that we can spend on whatever training we want, as long as it's medically related. So that's just money that's out there for us to use. But in terms of the core certifications, they're board certifications. So you study, and then there's a national registry test you have to take. And you pass that, and you get your certificate. And they're usually good for 2 to 4 years, and they all need to be constantly recertified. It's every year there's 2 or 3 that you have to redo.
Is there, I just see in the medical industry, especially, my daughter's a pharmacist, right? So she's talking about the new drugs, new stuff. I'm sure the equipment, there's a ton of new equipment that comes on the scene too that you guys have to learn how to use, correct?
Yeah, it's interesting. So across all of our bases, we have a consistency committee, and their only job is to make sure that all of those aircraft are the exact same. And like you said, with this constantly changing, medical atmosphere, there's always little changes. There's a new medicine here, there's a new syringe here, and Lifelink's never afraid to put money into making sure that's all consistent and staying safe with all the expiration dates. Weekly, monthly, all that stuff gets checked.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to and take this kind of gear towards hunters. What is the most common accident that people have? What have you seen?
So I guess to break it down pretty simply, hunting in general, including like getting to your hunting stand in a UTV, trauma is broken down into blunt, penetrating, in multi-system. And then kind of a tag onto that is like a medical aspect, like a heart attack or a stroke, due to increased activity when you might not be used to it. So a blunt trauma would be like, I fell off a tree stand and I hit my head. Well, when you hit your head, that's a perfect environment. So any increase in swelling or bleeding in your head is going to cause pressure on your brain. That's a time critical need to transport to relieve that pressure. Penetrating trauma, gunshot, arrow where it's not supposed to be, right? Those are time sensitive, bleeding. We need to get to a surgery suite, and we need to fix that bleeding. Anything we do is just delaying the inevitable need to that surgery center. Multi-system trauma, you take all of that together.
Worst case.
And it's worst case, and unfortunately, that's generally what it is. You don't have, rarely, if you have a head injury, you usually have something else, And those are probably what we see the most is the multi-system traumas, because you fell out of a tree, you hit your head, and you broke your leg. Well, you broke your leg, that jagged bone went into an artery, and now you're bleeding internally. So all that stuff is very time sensitive. Medical as well, right? So walking, pulling a deer out,
get stressed, heart attacks, right? We're not all of us are in the best of shape, and
time is muscle. Like that heart is actively dying until you can get to a catheterization center and open that vessel. It's dying.
Man, scary stuff.
Yeah.
I know you're a hunter, so what kind of recommendations would you give hunters to avoid this? I mean, is there stuff of precautions that they should be taking? I'm just.
Oh yeah, for sure. So like you said, always let somebody know where you are. I'm guilty of this. I didn't start wearing a full safety harness until I started working on an ambulance, and now I don't. Like, I clip in at the bottom. I slide that prusik all the way up to the top. I'm clipped in 100% of the time. I can't stress that enough. UTVs, there's some really powerful machines out there. Go slow, wear a helmet, wear a safety belt. leave the alcohol at home.
Yeah. Alcohol and hunting don't go along, nor do they in ATVs or power sports, right?
Right. There's some statistics I looked up in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So for snowmobiles and UTVs, there's about 40 fatalities a year per state. And I think almost 80% of those are alcohol involved.
Wow.
The DNR tracks all that.
Yeah, which makes sense, because you make stupid decisions, or you're too relaxed, or you go to a spot that you don't belong in, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's all things that people do. It's all great advice. I mean, I think Lifelink's a great service, and I appreciate everything that you do, and hopefully, your funding continues, and some people that listen to the podcast would like to donate. How would they go about to do that?
We have a website and a link.
Go to the website?
Yep, and we've also got some pamphlets with a QRS code that you can scan. In any private donation, any corporate partners we can look at getting together with and talking about how we can help our shared constituency.
Matt, it's been great to have you on Deer Talk Now. I appreciate everything that you do. This is this week's show. Join in next week to another episode of Deer Talk Now.
Deer Talk Now is brought to you by 10-Point Crossbow Technologies. Whether I'm in a tree stand, ground blind, or spot and stalk hunting, I know the Nitro 505 is up to any challenge. Check one out at a dealer near you or log on to 10pointcrossbows.com for more information.